We went through most of Matthew 24, but there's still the last part, which is not really so much focusing on the prophetic aspect of it, but I still want us to finish the chapter. But as usual, since it's our Bible class time, I want to start off by opening the door a little bit for any questions that anybody might have, or any further clarification we need on anything that was said earlier today or any time before. So I'm opening the room here at this moment for anybody who wants to ask that question. And I just want to express my appreciation for those who are showing their pictures, making it a little easier for me to focus on the fact that I'm talking to people and not just to a screen. It's good to
And
see
plus,
Brother Willie.
we have a visitor with Brother Willie.
I see that. I was about to say, welcome to Brother Willie and his visitor. It's nice
And
to see you.
she was a good friend and roommate to Sister Oria.
Ah, okay. Well, I'm very, very happy to see you. It's a pleasure and a privilege to have you with us, and we hope that you will be blessed by being with us. I'm sure we are already blessed by your presence. Would you mind sharing your name with us? Our brother, Sister Diane, you want to tell us your name?
Brother Willie will do it.
All right.
He can figure out how to work the phone.
Yeah.
My name is Lovey Pope. Or and I were friends for about 45 years. Our kids went to school together.
Okay, thank you. I didn't get the name so clearly.
Yeah, tell her to say it again. It
Lovey,
was
can you
Lovey.
hear me now?
I
Lovey.
think you said Lovey.
Lovey.
All right, Sister Lovey. Yeah, the mic is going in and out, but I got Lovey. So
Lovey Pope.
Lovey Pope.
Yes, and
Okay,
that's my
Sister.
maiden name, but we're not related.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
All right. Maybe somewhere down in the distant past that you don't even know about.
I doubt it.
All right. So anyway, it's great to have you with us, Sister Lovey, and we hope you will be blessed by your fellowship with us this afternoon. All right. So is there any question we want to look at before we actually go to the ending part of Matthew 24?
I have a quick question, Brother David.
Yes, Brother Cliff, go ahead.
You did a very good explanation of sin today. This, I do you think that it's a little confusing um, for for non-believers and new believers, those who don't know much of the truth? Do you think it's a little confusing when we use the same word for the deed and the being? Do you understand what the question?
I understand, Brother Cliff, and I would say that possibly, yeah, possibly you're right. The thing is, to be honest, very, very few people ever use the word to refer to the being. You know that the majority of the Christian world refers to sin as the deed. And so I think that is what confuses new believers because they become fixated on that limited understanding. And so their whole understanding of the gospel is messed up from the beginning. So if I think if it were introduced to them simply at the beginning that there are two aspects to sin. There's first of all sin as this uncontrollable power, which manifests itself in acts of transgression. I think that's very simple to understand. But because people don't get this at the beginning, it's difficult to understand. If I may make a comparison, you know the confusion about Jesus being God, right? They say Jesus is God. They say Jesus isn't God. Non-Trinitarians tend to focus on the statement that Jesus is not God. And Trinitarians, of course, focus on Jesus is God. The Bible says so. The simple truth is that the word God is used in two ways in the Bible. As we know, it's used to refer to the identity of the greatest being in the universe, and it's used to refer to the divine nature, the nature of divinity. As we know, when we talk about the greatest being in the universe, there's only one God, and it's the Father. There's nobody else. Jesus is not God in that sense of being the supreme being. But when it comes to having the divine nature, the nature of divinity, there are two divine beings. There's a Father and there's his Son, his begotten Son. So Jesus is God by nature, but he's not God in his personal identity. Because when you talk about God as a personal identity, it applies strictly, exclusively to God the Father. So, the confusion comes about because the new believers, since you mentioned them, new believers are just simply told Jesus is God, and because you don't have an understanding of the two different applications of that word, then the argument is settled. You're locked into darkness, as it were. And I think the same thing happens with the word sin. People are given one definition and they are told it's the only definition, and so they become locked into a narrow way of thinking that disqualifies them from understanding the plan of salvation and the way how God really deals with the sin problem.
The sad part about it is that the being sin that you described today is the most powerful understanding to understand the act of sin, because you can't really understand the act of sin without understanding the being of sin. And when you just go with the act of sin and run with that and use that as your ministry, you put people on a very shaky, misunderstanding ground on their spiritual walk, and they end up just relying on trying to fix the act of sin, not realizing the extent of the being of sin. And I think that's very sad. Do you?
Absolutely, Brother Cliff. And it's the story of the human race. It's the tragedy of the human race. When you put it like that, I can just think of so many illustrations or examples of what you're saying. Jesus said, it's not what goes into the cup that defiles it. It's not what goes into a person that defiles, but it is what comes out. Jesus says, make the inside of the cup clean, and the outside will be clean. Jesus talked about the tree being the problem. It's a fruit. An evil tree will bear evil fruit. A good tree bears good fruit. He pointed out that the problem is the tree and not the fruit. Long ago I heard this. It may not be an absolutely perfect representation of the matter, but I heard about two different perspectives to treating sickness. They said there was the allopathic method and there was a naturopathic method. That was long ago when I was a young Christian. Now, maybe it's an oversimplification of the situation, but generally speaking, the idea behind it is that there are some people who treat sickness by giving you a drug. And there are some people who look for the root of the problem and they try to treat the problem. And we say that is a naturopathic method because you try to identify the real cause of the problem and you try to fix the cause, and then the symptoms take care of themselves. While the idea was that in a generally speaking, the medical world tends to treat the symptoms. You have a fever, they give you a pill to stop the fever, or they give you a pill for a headache when you don't know what causes a fever or what causes a headache. You don't treat that root cause, and it's just the same thing. It's the ongoing problem of the human race. It's just the tendency of humanity to try to fix things in a superficial way because it's there in everything in life. And what God wants and what this whole sin argument teaches us is that the identifying of the root of the problem is important if we are to seek the true remedy. And as you intimated there, Brother Cliff, and it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. People who think that the problem is your behavior, they are never focused on Jesus. They are never really focused on Jesus. They mention him passingly sometimes. They use the narrative. They repeat the cliches. Oh, thank God for Jesus. Jesus is everything. But they never truly can appreciate or feel their great need for Jesus, because fixing their problem always seems to be just one action away. All right, I told a lie today. I just have to not tell my lie tomorrow. They're just one step away from fixing the problem in their mind, because they don't really understand what the problem is, and so they go through this unending strife all their life because of being misled from the beginning. So it's a good point you make, Brother Cliff, and it's very important that we understand it. All right.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Thank you, brother.
Thank you to Brother Cliff. I appreciated the question and the comment. All right. So if there is no other question.
There is a question, Brother David. It's in the chat. She needs 1 John 3 explained.
All right.
3 verses there.
1 John 3, 7 to 9. All right. Let me bring up my screen and then we'll look at the scripture itself. All right. It says, little children, let no man deceive you. He that doeth righteousness is righteous, even as he is righteous. He that committeth sin is of the devil, for the devil sinneth from the beginning. For this purpose the Son of God was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil. Whosoever is born of God does not commit sin, for his seed remaineth in him, and he cannot sin, because he is born of God. I'm going to bring up another translation on the right-hand panel, because there's a little thing here that I probably need to focus on. Now, I think almost any translation that we go to will give you the same understanding that I'm going to focus on here now. I'm first of all looking at the New American Standard Bible, and why I'm doing this is because, well, I could look at the NIV, but I know a lot of us don't trust the NIV. I'm skeptical about it in some things too, but we'll look at one or two translations. Look at what it says in verse 9. No one who is born of God practices sin. The King James Version says, does not commit sin. I think the Greek translation literally says, whosoever is born of God is not sinning. Now look at it, is not sinning. Present continuous. What? It's how you interpret that statement, is not sinning. Does it mean at no time in your life do you ever commit an act of sin, or does it mean that you are not in the habit of practicing sin? Now, the King James Version seems to say you absolutely never do a wrong action. The other translations, the first one we look at here is the New American Standard Bible. It says does not practice sin. The NIV says will not continue to sin. The World English Bible says, well, this one says doesn't commit sin. You have some of them. The New English Translation says does not practice sin. Okay, but as I said, the Greek itself literally says is not sinning. And my understanding is that it means that person does not practice sin. The person does not live in a state of sin. The person who is outside of Christ does. So let's look at the passage again with that understanding. As a matter of fact, you can go way back with this with these verses, but since Sister Rose asked to start from 7, that's where it goes. We'll start. So he starts by saying, little children, let nobody deceive you. The one who is doing righteousness. Let me see how that is translated in the NASB. Again, it's talking about the one who practices righteousness, or the one who lives a lifestyle that is righteous. Okay, now look at what John says. The one who lives a lifestyle that is righteous. He does not become righteous because of the way he's living, but the fact that he's living a righteous life reveals that he's righteous just as Jesus is righteous. If you are living a righteous life, how can you live a righteous life? It's because the righteous one is living in you, and because Jesus is living in you, you have the righteousness of Christ. Therefore, you are righteous just as Jesus is righteous, because it is his righteousness. This is what he's saying. The one who is doing righteousness, or the one who is practicing a righteous lifestyle, is righteous. He's doing it because he is righteous, and he is righteous in the same way that Jesus is righteous. Now, the next verse says, the one who commits sin, or the one who is practicing sin, belongs to the devil. He says he is of the devil. You don't become of the devil because you are practicing sin, but practicing sin reveals that you are not of God. You don't belong to God. You have not been born again. You are of the devil because it's the devil's principle that is ruling and controlling your life. And it says, for this purpose the Son of God was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil. So the point is, the work of the devil in this context is the practice of sin. And the work of God in this context is the practice of righteousness. So Jesus was manifested in order that he might destroy the works of the devil, or the practice of sin. So the one who is doing righteousness, who is not practicing sin, reveals that Jesus is living in him. The work of Christ in his life has been accomplished. Sin, as a dominating principle, has been destroyed. The old man has been taken away. And that is why he says, therefore, this is what it comes down to. Whosoever is born of God, the one who is born again and who possesses the righteousness of Christ, and who is righteous even as Christ is righteous, this person does not practice sin. For his seed, that is Jesus Christ, remains in him, and he cannot practice sin because he is born of God. Okay, and he says this is how you can identify the children of God and the children of Satan. In this, the children of God are manifest, and the children of the devil. Whosoever doeth not righteousness, or whoever does not practice righteousness, is not of God, neither he that loveth not his brother. So, probably because of the way it is put in the King James Version. In the King James Version, it seems to focus on practicing one single action. The wording gives you that idea. That if you practice one single act of transgression, it means you're of the devil. Whereas when you look at what the word literally says in the Greek, it's not saying this. It's talking about the practice of this sin. In other words, when a person is a Christian and is born again, this morning brother Joel was asking about what is it that dies, and the point was made that the spirit is what has been transformed, but your body remains the same, your memories remain the same, your brain remains the same. And so while you still have the relics of the old life in your physical structure, in your spiritual structure, you have been made brand new. But because you still have the memories and ingrained habits, sometimes you find that a Christian slips back into an act of transgression. Let me put it that way. I hardly even want to call it sin, but but most people would define it as sin. I would say it's an act of transgression. Sometimes it happens to a Christian, but it is not a habitual practice. It is not his lifestyle. He's not living as a child of Satan, which is what he used to do before he became a child of Christ. His whole life was oriented towards sin. Now his whole life is oriented towards righteousness. The act of transgression is an aberration. It's a strange thing in a Christian. And this is what the passage is really focusing on, Sister Rose. Maybe you can give a little feedback and see if this response. All right, thank you. You say it's easier to understand based on the Bible version used. And I agree. Because as much as I love the good old King James Version, I do admit that it's written in ancient terminology. It's the language of the years of King James. And there are words there that have completely changed their meaning. And there are ways that it is expressed sometimes where you have an alternative possible explanation that makes better sense. And in this is why I like to have the other translations available. I read from the King James even in my personal study, but if there's something that comes up that is a little difficult, I'm going to look at the other translations because it's helpful to do this. All right, so I don't know if there's another question. Let me give the
Brother
final.
David,
Yes, Sister Maria.
what about if the person is a morally right, but he's not really righteous because his motives are selfishness? So how could you distinguish between the really righteous person versus the moral right? Because everybody can do morally right, but they're not righteous. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. What you the question is a very good question because um this of course, if you look at First John 3, the verses we just read, and you look at it from the point of view of your behavior, as you said, somebody can get away with practicing morality, and they might pass through that qualification because they say, look, I don't lie, I don't steal. The person has never been born again, and outwardly they appear to be morally circumspect, but their character. I know people who I've heard it said that. I don't know if it's true. I'm just going to maybe probably just saying what I've heard. I've heard that Jews are some of the most selfish people. Maybe I don't like to characterize people in a group, but it's kind of proverbial. If even Shakespeare wrote a book about a Jew named Shylock who was so exacting that the word Shylock has become a proverbial for people who are mean and exacting. I've heard people say that they have met Adventists who are like that. And I don't know if it's true. Like I said, I'm just trying to make a point. And the point is that being outwardly, well, I could just say the scribes and Pharisees, and that would settle it. These were people who were moralists, as you say, Sister Maria. They fasted. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I possess. I pray. The Pharisee stood and he tabulated his morality, his moral behavior. And Jesus says he went to his home not justified. He was not righteous in the sight of God. So you're perfectly right, Sister Maria. What makes a person righteous is being born again. That's the key element. But of course, it shows itself in its behavior. But what we know is that the person who is truly righteous, such a person does not promote his righteousness. It's amazing that the person who is most righteous is the person who is most conscious of his inability. This is why people who are truly righteous will be praising the Lord constantly because they are the ones who know that in me there's no good thing. I praise God for what appears in my life because it is not I, it is Christ. Such a person is never heard blowing his own trumpet. It's Jesus. But you know, we still, God has not given us the job of judging people. In other words, who am I to say to a person, you're not a genuine Christian? I might have a private opinion, but I'm not going to say it publicly unless it becomes very blatant, because I know that sometimes you have people who are Christians, but they're a little weak. Sometimes you have people who are true Christians, but they are ignorant of something. So even though Jesus says, by their fruits you shall know them, I will still kind of keep my opinion private unless it becomes very blatant that this person is definitely not led by the Spirit of God. But we should be able to have an idea. If somebody is habitually practicing unchristlike behavior, habitually, then of course the Bible condemns that person. The Bible says he who practices sin is of the devil. For the devil sins from the beginning. The person who is constantly harsh and selfish and maybe constantly committing adultery or lying or stealing, you don't need to ask questions. There's a person who is close to me who I don't want to say who, but every time I talk to this person, he says he's a Christian. Every time I talk to him, he's a Christian. Oh my goodness. I don't even bother to say anything anymore, right? He oh anyway. But he insists that he's a Christian when his life is so much the life of a reprobate. But so I have a right to form an opinion about that person because his works clearly identify who he is. I think this person is mistaking a desire for the actual thing. There are people who desire to be Christians, but they don't know Christ. They don't have an experience with him, and some people are confused about that. But anyway, that's a little bit beside the point. So that's what I would say to that, Sister Maria.
I think I agree with her, David. Yeah. But what about the person that are, because you mentioned one of our studies said that even a person is born again, they could also be living as a carnal.
You mean in 1 Corinthians?
Yeah, like I can't remember, but I was just remember what you're saying that they could be a people that are born in the spirit, but they still live carnally, just like Paul mentioned in in First Corinthians,
Yes.
right? So
Paul, if these people, if these people, as it were, had broken out in all aspects of their lives, I don't think you could have said they were born again. These people were carnal in one aspect, and let me explain why. When you go to the book of 1 Corinthians, we find that these people had become cliquish. They had become focused on following different men. One followed Paul, one followed Apollos, one followed Peter. And it's what I pointed out, that sometimes you're a Christian, but you don't understand because you are inexperienced or you're ignorant of certain things. You become you display some aspects of carnality, maybe without properly recognizing it, because Paul says, look here, you're carnal while you are still having this clannish mentality, while you are still preferring one person above another in this way. Are you not carnal and you're walking like men? What he meant was that your behavior is not the behavior of Christ. It's not a heavenly behavior. It's human behavior. It's human beings who set themselves up to worship men and set up one against the other. So in this perspective, in this aspect of your life, they were behaving like carnal people. So when Paul says you're carnal, while you have this behavior, you're carnal. He's not saying in every aspect of your life you are behaving like you are still sinners. Because I think if that were true, you'd have to conclude these people were not born again. But the interesting thing is that after Paul wrote them this letter, when you go to 2 Corinthians, you see Paul commending them because after they got the message from Paul, they reformed their behavior. Paul said it produced a great change in the way they approached things. So clearly, what they needed was just some light, some understanding. They needed some Christian counseling to make them understand this is not appropriate Christian behavior. And that's an interesting thing because I believe, and I think all of us believe, that when a person is born again, there is a supernatural change that takes place. We believe that because Christ lives inside of you, there is a change that is not dependent on how much you know. Your spirit is changed. You receive a new heart. The Bible says God puts his law in your heart and in your mind. In other words, by nature, you begin to produce Christ-like behavior. However, you still need to be educated because you don't know everything. This is why the New Testament is full of so much counsel. Paul says that if you are eating food in an idol that is offered to idols, you're a Christian. You know that an idol is nothing. Eat anything. If it's offered to the idol, eat it. The idol can't help you or curse you. But he said, if somebody comes and says, did you know this was offered to idols? For the sake of that person's conscience, you subdue your own conscience and you say, okay, I won't eat it. For the sake of that person. So these are nuances in the Christian life that maybe you don't know by nature. These are things that somebody can give you counsel about. People can teach you. People can help to build you up. Perhaps in your Christian life, here's how it goes, right? Somebody says, okay, my My minister is Brother David. Somebody else comes and says, well, my minister is Brother Howard. And somebody says, well, Brother David is a better preacher. Somebody says, well, Brother Howard explains things better. And you get into a clique and you say, I don't listen to Brother Howard because, you know, I am a follower of this brother. This is what was happening in Corinth. Now, you might say, as a Christian, there are many reasons why you can say this, right? I know that as a Christian, there are some people I don't listen to. Even people who say that they belong to the one God movement, I don't listen to them, right? And as a Christian, I don't feel guilty because I don't listen to them. Because first of all, I can't listen to everybody. And secondly, there are some people that I think it's a waste of time to listen to them because they just keep on saying the same things over and over. And I don't really get a benefit from listening to them. I prefer to listen to something where I'm being benefited. Now, I do this privately, okay? And I might even have that feeling when it comes to, a person, when it comes to Brother Nada and Brother Imad or Brother Howard or Daniel for that matter, I might have this feeling that I prefer to listen to this person or the other. But when I get to the place where now I begin to make an issue of it and make it a contention, then there's something wrong because I'm beginning to set up people against other people, and I'm beginning to put down my brother or my sister. And now I'm entering into an arena where I'm indulging in unchristlike behavior. The fact that I choose to listen to this person and not to that person is my private preference. That's not unchristian. But when I make a public issue of it, now I begin to do something that is beginning to affect my Christian witness. And this is what this is what might happen to a Christian. You have an opinion, but then you begin to step over the border of your opinion and to begin to do something now that is damaging to somebody else, and you don't even realize it. You don't recognize it till somebody comes and says, somebody like Paul comes along and says, do you know this is carnal behavior? This is carnal behavior. You're acting like the world. You're not acting like a Christian. And then you realize it. You say, I see. I understand what you're saying. I'm sorry for what I'm doing. And you change your ways. This is kind of like what was happening in Corinth. So the fact that Paul referred to them as carnal was not a statement to say that they had lost their salvation and they were no longer born again. It was his way of saying you're Christians, but you are manifesting on Christ-like behavior. And as I pointed out, after they got the letter from Paul, they reformed their behavior. So that's what a Christian does. All right. So if that is okay, Sister Maria, we will go ahead and go to Matthew 24.
Yes, Brother David, I agree 100%.
All right,
Amen.
Sister.
Yeah.
God bless you. All right. So we're going to go to Matthew 24. And let's see if we can complete this chapter this week. And then next week we'll move on. So we have covered, as I said, most of the prophetic aspects of Matthew 24. But and also I want to bring up Luke 21 on the right panel, just in case there's anything that comes up that we want to compare, because Luke gives you almost exactly the same story, but there are some little things that are added or left out that sometimes brings a little bit of further light on what we are looking at. So we are going to bring up both passages on the screen. Now, I think we will pick up from about where he talks about the fig tree, verse 32 in Matthew 24. And the corresponding verse in Luke is about verse 29. So let me keep both things on the screen. But we're going to focus mostly on the left panel, Matthew 24. Jesus says, now learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender and putteth forth his leaves, you know that summer is nigh. So he was always telling parables. And one of the things about a parable is that it makes it easy to remember a lesson. Many years ago, when I was still a teenager, I heard about something called mnemonics. And now that I'm getting a little older, I find myself practicing mnemonics more over and over. More. What is mnemonics? It's the idea of associating a memory with a picture. When you have difficulty remembering something, try to put a distorted picture in association with that memory. And you're not forgetting the picture. You might forget the name, but you're not forgetting the picture. Like sometimes if I want to remember, I need to look up the ceremonial law. I get a picture in my mind of the Ten Commandments with somebody standing on top of the Ten Commandments, and they are plunging a knife into a lamb on top of the Ten Commandments. All right, so let's say I get up in the morning at about 4 o'clock, I'm praying, and I get an idea about the ceremonial law. I put a picture like that in my mind. There's the Ten Commandments. There's somebody standing on top of it with a knife, and he's plunging it into a lamb, and the blood is flowing. I put a graphic picture in my mind. Anytime from now till next week, I can remember that, what I have in mind. If you just think ceremonial law, at my age, your brain becomes so congested you forget. But once you see the picture, every time you see that, I can always recall the picture. I say, I wanted to talk about the ceremonial law. So I'm using this more and more to remember things that I really want to remember. If I don't have something to write down, or if I don't have my phone that I can record it on at the moment, I put a picture in my mind. And this was Jesus's method. Every time those people saw a fig tree putting out young leaves, they remembered what he said. This is why he was always telling parables. And you find that it's very helpful in preaching too. You bring up illustrations. People forget what you're saying, but they remember the stories. And because they remember the stories, they can always recreate what you were saying. So this is what Jesus did. He said, look here, think about the fig tree. When you see it putting forth leaves, you know that summer is near. And so he says, so likewise ye, when you shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Jesus was practicing this mnemonics long before it became a name. And he was planting something in your mind that you would never forget. So once you have read this verse through and thought about what it means, anytime you go outside, if I go outside and see my star apple tree pushing out new leaves, I will remember this verse. And I will start to look around and see what are the signs that I'm seeing. Because he says, when you shall see all these things, you can know something, you can have knowledge of something. You know that it is near, even at the doors. So remember, Jesus is responding to the question that we got at the beginning. He's still on this question where the disciples asked him, tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of your coming and of the end of the world? And remember, Jesus has given them the answer to 3 questions by telling what seems to be one continuous story, but it really spans several ages. But he says now there is a certain point in time when you are going to recognize that everything is being fulfilled. All the things that I've said, you're going to see that all of these things are being fulfilled or have been fulfilled. And at this point, learn your lesson from the fig tree. When you see the fig tree putting out young leaves, you're certain that it's becoming summer. This is not so true in Jamaica because we have trees putting out leaves all around the year. But if you live in a place like Palestine, apparently, or like America, in places where you have snow and winter, I know that spring is very much a great event, all the trees become dry and everything look like it has passed through chemotherapy. And then finally you begin to see a little greenery. And you say, ah, finally. And you hope that there's not any late snow. And then you know that, okay, we're beginning to come to the place where we can get our gardens ready and so forth. And so Jesus, in that culture, these were very real things that people would recognize and look forward to. And so he says, when you see this, remember what I said to you. Look at the signs and read them the same way. And then he makes this striking statement. And for this statement, Jesus has been sometimes accused of being a false prophet. He says, verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. And of course, skeptics jump on this and they say, ha, that generation passed long ago. Peter, James, and John and the rest of them are long gone and dead. And it's because when people read the Bible, they read it with a limited perspective. Jesus is referring to the generation that is alive to see these things, to recognize that these things have been fulfilled. As we have been looking at this passage, what we have seen is that there have been people who live with the thought that these things were fulfilled, but there never was a generation that saw all of these things fulfilled. Are we there today? I think most of us are pretty confident that we have seen just about everything fulfilled, except the stars falling, the sun turning to darkness, the moon to blood, and the powers of the heaven being shaken. If you accept Adventist history, they would say that that happened, the last of these, in 1833. But of course, it's been a long, long time, and that generation has been long dead and gone. And that is one of the reasons why I'm pretty certain that what happened back in 1833 was not the biblical fulfillment of these signs. I think the generation that sees these things happening, these cosmic signs, that generation will absolutely not pass till all of them are fulfilled. So Jesus was really giving his people a marker, and he was saying, if you're alive, if you're one of my children and you're alive, and you see this happen, you can start selling and leaving your crops in the field. What they did in 1844, you can do it. All right, you can prepare to see Jesus, to be alive to see the Lord coming. At this point, it would be wise to not make any preparations to continue to live on this earth. I think that's what he's really saying. There is a generation that will know it's time. And so strong was he in this assertion that he goes on to say, heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. He liked to use this phrase, and I think in Matthew 5, he used the same phrase when he says that heaven and earth, until heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle would no wise pass from the law until all was fulfilled. It was really kind of like a statement that they used at that time, till even if heaven and earth pass. It was sort of like taking an oath or swearing. It was like a positive declaration of something that is absolutely certain, like he used to say, verily, verily, an assertion that adds strength to what he's saying. He said, heaven and earth shall pass away, but my word shall not pass away. It's a certainty that what he's saying will absolutely be fulfilled. In spite of this, in spite of the fact that we will know when it is near and that this generation will not pass who sees these things happen, he goes on to say, but of that day and that hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. Now, this is one of the things that made people extremely critical of the early Millerites. In the days of William Miller, in the beginning of the Adventist movement, when William Miller predicted that Jesus would return on October 22, 1844, the majority of the Christian world rejected Miller's prediction because one of the things that they used was this verse. The verse says, nobody knows the day and the hour of the coming of Jesus, not even the angels of heaven, but only God the Father. So the Millerites responded by saying, well, Jesus said nobody knows the day or the hour at that point in time when he was speaking, but he never said nobody will ever know the day or the hour. That's how they defended themselves. That's how they defended their position. They said the verse does not say nobody will ever know. So it was true that 2,000 years ago nobody knew. But what they were saying is that now today we do know. Of course, it turned out that they were wrong. And I still believe that the verse holds true today and until the end of time. Because if you look at what Jesus is saying, let's consider what he's saying. Why does he say that nobody knows the day and the hour? If he was saying nobody knows now, but possibly in the future you will know, the statement is kind of like a pointless statement. It has no meaning. There's no need to say it. Because it was very clear that nobody knew the day or the hour. The statement itself has no meaning. There's no reason to say it. If what Jesus is saying is this, look, be ready because you will not know when. That's what he's trying to say. Think about what he's saying. Be in a state of readiness because your preparation for my coming will not be dependent upon expecting a certain date. That's what he's saying. We will read a little further and you will see that this is what he's saying. He's saying, in preparing for my coming, don't focus on a particular time because you will not know that time. In other words, if you are focusing on a particular time, you are going to get caught out because nobody knows the time. So he brought in this statement because he wanted to emphasize you need to be in a constant state of preparedness. So if it were true that at a certain point in time we would know the day or the hour, then the whole purpose of this statement is gone. It's meaningless. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. And as we continue reading, you will see that this is a point that he's making. Because if you look at what he says now as we go down, let's read the next couple of verses. He says, but as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. What is his point? What is he trying to say? He's trying to say, now, before I point out what he's trying to say, I have sometimes found a secondary implication in what Jesus is saying, all right? And other people have done it too, right? In the days of Noah, one of the things that was happening, according to the Jewish writings, one of the things that was happening was that men were getting married to men. This is in the Jewish writings that goes back for many hundreds of years. It's not a recent thing. It's there. Okay. They say that's one of the things that was happening back there before the flood. So I've often mentioned this as one of the signs of the last days. But this is a secondary point. It's not the main point of what Jesus is saying. If you look at what he's saying, he says, in the days that were before the flood, look at what they were doing. They were eating and drinking. Is Jesus saying that we need to stop eating and drinking? I don't think so. He said they were marrying and giving in marriage. Is Jesus saying people need to stop getting married? That's not his point. I think if you look at Luke, it talks about they were also building and planting. Let me see if I can find the exact, because I want to point out that it's not in Luke 21. It may be in Luke chapter 17. I don't want to spend my time jumping around from chapter to chapter, but you will know. You will recall there's another place where he talks about they were building and planting. There's nothing wrong with building and planting. The point he's making is that they were carrying on the normal affairs of life completely unaware of the time in which they were living. There's nothing wrong with eating and drinking. If you stop doing it, you'll drop dead. Okay? Nothing wrong with eating and drinking. There's nothing wrong with marrying and giving in marriage, although at some point in time it might not be the wisest thing to do. But there's nothing that God will never condemn a person for getting married because he made men and women to be together, right? But the point is, this is the thing that made it so terrible. They did it until the day that Noah entered into the ark and did not know. They did not know this was their problem. When a person sets himself to be so absorbed in the common affairs of life, he's eating and drinking, he's marrying and giving in marriage, he's building and planting, that he's unconscious of the greater implications of the time in which he's living. He's not aware that eternity is at his doorstep. Jesus just told you to watch the fig tree. When you see the leaves begin to blossom, you know what is happening. He was saying, when you see certain things begin to happen, you know that it is at the door. Don't be like the people of Noah's day. They were involved in eating and drinking. They were involved in the normal affairs of life when it was a time for abnormal responses. It was a time for abnormal behavior. But they were so ignorant of it that they were locked into normal living. That is what he was trying to say. That's the point he's making. Don't live a normal life in an abnormal time. And so he was saying, keep your eyes open, because that abnormal time is coming. And if you have your eyes open, you will be able to discern it. And you will not be like the people in the days of the flood. Their crime was, there's nothing in this verse that talks about the wickedness of the antediluvians. It just talks about their carelessness, not their wickedness. It talks about their failure to discern the signs of the times. Their problem was that they did not know, did not understand what was going on until the flood came and took them all away. And he says, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. His whole point in this last part of Matthew 24 is focusing on the necessity to be aware of the signs of the times and to respond appropriately. That's his point. So he goes on to emphasize there's nothing sinister about what he says next. Then shall two be in the field, the one shall be taken and the other left. Two women shall be grinding at the mill, the one shall be taken and the other left. There's nothing wrong with two being in the field. There's nothing wrong. They are doing nothing wrong. The two women grinding at the mill are doing nothing wrong. They are milling corn. They're working at the mill and milling corn. The two men in the field are probably planting. Now, again, here is the thing. In many of these statements of Jesus, he's not giving us a detailed description of what is going on. He's giving us let me use my own words. It's a stylized representation. When I say stylized, what do I mean? I mean, he's focusing on the main point, but not the details of the story, because there are people who believe in the rapture. They say, look here, two people are going to be in the same bed, because that's what it says, I think, in Luke. Two people are in the same bed. One disappears and the other left behind. It's a beautiful passage for teaching the secret rapture. Two men are out there planting and one disappears and the other one is in his field, left in his field looking bewildered. This is not Jesus' point at all. What he's focusing on, he's telling a story to emphasize the complete unexpectedness of what happens. He's emphasizing how much by surprise people are going to be taken. So he gives us two illustrations that are not to be taken in the exact details, like he does all the time. And anybody who thinks that what I'm saying, is a little, it's a little accommodating. Not true. Jesus told a story of two men who died, and one went to hell, and one went and sat in Abraham's bosom. It's Jesus' method of operating. When you read his parables, this is what I want to say to you. There are some of these parables that are very close parallels to reality, but a lot of them The whole story is about the point he's making. It's not about the story. Please remember that when you are reading the parables of Jesus, and I can give you over and over examples of this. The one about the rich man and Lazarus is one of those stories. Nobody dies and goes into Abraham's bosom. Nobody dies and goes down to hell, looking up into heaven and seeing people up there sitting in Abraham's bosom. It's a story to make a point. And there are many of these stories in the teachings of Jesus. And this is one of them. Okay? You look at the point that is being made and don't put more to the story than what is being meant. What Jesus is trying to do is giving you an illustration that makes you understand. The moment of the end will catch people so completely by surprise that people won't know until the last moment. Everything will seem to be that we are at the same place until the last moment. Now, of course, there are other parables that tell us it's not quite exactly this way. For example, in the story of the 10 virgins, that's another story about the end of time, isn't it? And what happens? It says that the wise virgins go into the marriage with the bridegroom, and the other 5, what happened to them? They are cast into outer darkness. There is a separation that takes place even before Jesus comes again. If you look at the parable of the wheat and the tares, what happens? They grow together. There's no distinction. But at the time of the end, what happens? The angel comes and separates them and makes a distinction. They are not two in the field. They are not two in the same bed. They are not two grinding at the mill. There's a separation that takes place even before Jesus comes to gather them. So you see, one story balances another. And the point I'm making is that when you read a parable, look at the point that is being made and don't overemphasize the details of the story. You can get distracted by that. All right, and I hope that point is understood, because you will find that you can approach the parables of Jesus with a little bit more balance and a little bit more assurance if you understand this principle. So here's his point. Here is his point in all that he has just said. Watch, therefore, that's my bottom line. For you do not know what hour your Lord will come. And this was true in AD 31. It was true in 1844. It's true in 2022. And it will be true right up until the end. This is the point of what he was saying when he says nobody knows the day or the hour. Anybody comes and tells you that, look here, get ready, Jesus is coming next year on such and such a date. You can discard that person and absolutely know this is a misguided person or a clear false prophet, because Jesus himself declared nobody will know, because the coming of Jesus is a part of the test that will separate the wheat from the tares. You do not know, and God intends that you should not know, so you can remain in a state of preparedness. So the wise virgins can keep the oil burning in their lamps. Because he delays the foolish virgins, the oil goes out. It's a part of the process by which God separates the true from the fake. He goes on to say, but know this, take note of this, that if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. Therefore, this is his point, be you also ready. For in such an hour as you think not, the Son of Man cometh. And this is a striking point. This is what Jesus says about his coming. When does it take place? It takes place in such an hour as you think not. I don't know. It's kind of a little strange, because he says, when you see these things happen, you can know that it is near. So you should know that it is near, and yet he's saying it will be at a time that you don't think it is so. It's kind of amazing. He gives you signs and says that you should know that it is near when you see these signs. At the same time, he predicts that it will be at a time when you don't think it will happen. So that seems to be a contradiction. But you know what comes to mind is that at almost every step in the history of God's work, at the moments of the greatest crises, God's people have managed to be taken by surprise. At the moments of the greatest crises, God's people have managed to be taken by surprise. When Jesus came, 3 wise men and a few little shepherds were the only people who knew, apart from the little old lady that in the temple and the little old man. Nobody knew. Jesus told his disciples repeatedly, the Son of Man is going to be going up to Jerusalem. He will be taken captive by the Jews and he will be killed. He told them over and over. And when it happened, they managed to be taken by surprise. They managed to be completely unprepared, so unprepared that they forsook him and they left him. So unprepared that when he died, they went back to catching fish. So unprepared that when they heard that he was raised from the dead, they wouldn't believe it. It's kind of amazing. It shows you that we humans, we do very well in a time of peace and safety. But when the crisis comes and our faith is put to the grindstone, it proves to be a very poor thing. So it's good that we have these statements to help us, because I'm pretty sure that the time that is coming, things are going to happen to catch us by surprise. You can't be tested if you are not taken by surprise. That's a principle that I know that in spite of what I'm saying, I expect to be taken by surprise. And because of this, I'm trying not to build my security upon what I know. And brothers and sisters, that's probably the most important thing I've said this evening. Don't build your security upon what you know. Build your security upon building a relationship with the one who knows all things. Jesus will never be taken by surprise, but we will be. And when we are taken by surprise, we will survive because we have a faith in him. We have faith in him. We know that, look here, he's dead and he's in the grave. But we trust him. He's going to take us through this. Look, they're burning some of us. Look, many of us are in prison. Look, the movement is destroyed. Our people are scattered. But he is in charge. And I don't know what is happening, and I don't know how I'm going to survive this, but I'm holding on to him. That is our safety. But he also, was there somebody who opened his mic to say something? All right. But he also told us to be in a state of readiness. And I understand to be in a state of readiness means that we are binding ourselves more and more closely to Jesus. As we see the signs of the times taking place, as we see peril increasing on every hand. I know that there is in some circles, and I don't mean among us, but I know that there are circles where people are preparing by storing up food and by buying guns and by trying to discern the ancient mysteries and the ancient secrets and find out things that were hidden from men before, and they're trying to prepare themselves. There's only one qualification to face the unknown, and it is to have the one living in us who knows all things. It's the only qualification. When a little boy finds himself in trouble, he hangs on more tightly to his mother or his father. The only one who tries to let go and strike out on his own and to depend on himself is the one who has an absolutely poor parent, somebody that he cannot depend on or trust. But the one who finds himself, the child who finds himself in difficulties, clings more firmly to his parents. That is what happens to those who belong to Christ. As the crisis increases, as we see the signs of the times, as we see catastrophes and we see the end time signs being fulfilled, we bind ourselves closer to the Lord. We make sure that we have the wedding garment. We know that we have the master of ocean and sea and sky dwelling within, but this is the only safety. So when Jesus says, be ye therefore ready, it doesn't mean go out and buy a set of guns. It doesn't mean go out and stock up. It means make sure that your relationship with me is solidly grounded. Because I'm coming back in a time when nobody expects it. As a matter of fact, let me just go quickly to Luke chapter, I think it's Luke 17, where he talks about, no, it's Luke 21 right here. Look at how Jesus describes it. He says in verse 34, and take heed to yourselves, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged. Luke gives you some details. To be overcharged, it's like when you're over full of food. All you want to do is sleep, or you're overexcited. You don't think straight. There are moments when you become so emotional that you're not thinking straight. He says you become overcharged with surfeiting. Surfeiting here means overdoing things. You're playing too much. You're eating too much. You're drinking too much. You're working too hard. You're overdoing things. And so your heart becomes burdened down. Your heart is overcharged. You're concerned with the cares of life. You're overcharged with surfeiting, with overdoing things, and drunkenness. Maybe not literally drunk, but you are spiritually drunk in that you allow yourself to lose your balance. You have lost your balance and you cannot find your right relationship to reality because you have allowed your mind to become dragged into one direction or the other by focusing on what you should not be focusing on. He even mentions the cares of this life. And, I refer to the cares of this life as the respectable sin, the respectable destroyer, because what are the cares of life? It's the problem that you have to find your children's school fees. It's a problem that you have the mortgage to pay. It's a problem that you have to make sure that you have enough budget to take care of your food each week. It's the normal good things that you have to do to survive. These are the cares of life. And Jesus refers to these as one of the things that destroys people. And I think in this context, it's good to remember that we are counseled in the scripture, casting all your cares upon him because he careth for you. Those who carry their cares themselves will certainly find themselves in this condition of being drunk and overcharged. And Jesus says the consequence of all of this is so that day come upon you unawares. That's the point. So focused on the things you need to survive in this life that you're unprepared for the life to come. You're unprepared for the greater reality. That's the terrible thing. He says, for as a snare shall it come on all them that dwell on the face of the whole earth. Now, this illustration is a striking one because, I know what a snare is. I've used a snare in my life many times. I used to try to set traps for birds when I was a boy. And even as an adult, I've set snares. In Jamaica, they call them fly up, and they have one they call calaban. And I've even used snares to catch. Well, I know that this is not the best, the most acceptable thing, but I've used snares to catch dogs that were, coming to use my yard as a toilet. In Jamaica, that's not so acceptable like other places. But anyway, I never killed them, but I caught them and tried to discourage them from coming back. But a snare is basically a trap. When you're going to catch birds, you put a noose in a string, and you set it in such a way that when the bird or the animal takes the food, it pulls on a little trigger, and the thing flies up, and it catches the animal on the leg or on the neck or something, and it's caught. And the very essence of a snare is that you have no suspicion at all. If the animal suspects in the slightest degree that there's danger, he's not coming near. You have to set it up in such a way that there is no trace of anything to cause suspicion. Otherwise, your snare will fail. And that is the illustration Jesus uses to talk about his coming. He says, as a snare, it is going to come upon those who dwell on the whole earth. In Luke, he says, in such an hour as you think not. The world will be thinking the opposite. As a matter of fact, when Paul talks about it, he says that is the moment they will be saying peace and safety. The coming of Jesus is at a moment and in circumstances where the world is anticipating everything is heading for prosperity and a brave new age. Nobody thinks of the coming of Jesus, except, of course, God's people have to be thinking in this way. Otherwise, the snare will catch us as well. So this is what he says. It will come as a snare to those that dwell on the whole earth. So back to Matthew 24, Jesus says, who then is a faithful and wise servant whom the Lord hath made ruler over his household to give them meat in due season? He's here speaking to his people who have been appointed to share the word and to prepare others for this event. He says, blessed is that servant whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. Truly I say unto you that he shall make him ruler over all his goods. And again, he's using a parable, right? It doesn't mean that when you go to heaven, you are going to rule over other people. And some are going to get a high position and some get a low position. I don't think heaven is like that. I think everybody is going to go to a place where they are perfectly happy with what God asks them to do. But he's really using an earthly illustration. He's using the illustration of a servant and a master. The one who is faithful will be rewarded. But the next few statements are significant. He says, but if that evil servant shall say in his heart, my Lord delayeth his coming. Here's the problem. Not just that the person is unaware of the coming of Jesus, but he shall begin to smite his fellow servants. That's one. You begin to mistreat your brethren. And I suppose sometimes this comes out more forcefully in the context of people who belong to denominations. Okay, one of the things that happens, and I think it's mostly in denominations, you see it happening. They disfellowship people, they put them out. If they, and many of us here have suffered that kind of treatment. Jesus talks about the evil servant who does not recognize that the coming of Jesus is near. His eyes are focused on other things, and so consequently, even the claims of brotherhood don't mean as much to this person. He begins to smite his fellow servants, and look what he does. He begins to eat and drink with the drunken. Who are the drunken? They are the people who have been drinking the wine of Babylon. Because the Bible says that it says in Revelation that Babylon has made all nations drunk with the wine of her fornication. So Jesus is speaking about people who profess to be his people here, and they are eating and drinking with the drunken, means that they have adopted the principles and the practices and the lifestyle and the thinking of the people of Babylon. This is what happens. This is what happens because they conclude that the Lord delays his coming. And so he says, the Lord of that servant shall come in a day when he looketh not for him, and in an hour that he's not aware of. So again, Jesus makes it clear that one of the marks of his coming, one of the characteristics of his coming will be that it will be in a moment when people are least expecting it. Even his people are somewhat taken by surprise. They know that it's in this time period. They are aware that it's time to trim our lamps. They know it's time to trim the lamps, and they trim their lamps, but they don't know the day or the hour. And when it happens, to some extent, even they are surprised. But they are not unprepared. Surprised, but not unprepared. But those who have been drinking and eating with the drunken, they are both unprepared and surprised. And so they end up with the destiny. The Lord comes and cuts him asunder and appoints him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So basically, this brings us to the end of our study on Matthew chapter 24. And
Brother David,
yes, Brother Willie.
that the verse you just went over about the evil servant not knowing, the time, you know, um, the evil servant saying that his Lord delayeth his coming. That reminds me of the children at the bottom of Mount Sinai when Moses went up to the mountain for those 40 days, and they said that when they was down there building the golden calf, talking about they making them another god, and they was dancing and they was singing and they was doing all kind of things, and they said the same thing about Moses. They said that this man delayeth his coming. So it's
Yeah,
a good parallel, you know.
yeah.
Because they said the same thing about Moses when he was in the mountain with Jesus, with God for them 40 days.
That I never ever made that connection, brother Willie. But it's a nice connection. It kind of reminds me of a little proverb that says, "When the cat's away, the mice will play." And that's what happened with exactly. It shows you that the tendency of carnal people is that they need somebody to watch them, and that is the system of legalism. The system of the law is that you need somebody to watch you, and you need an iron rod over your back, otherwise you will not behave the way you should. And I think this is why the evil servant and the people who are caught in the snare, this is why they are caught, because they are legalists. They are depending on somebody to watch them and to tell them how to behave. The people who are not caught are the people who know Christ. They're not legalistic. They're not depending upon being kept by a system or a set of rules. They are depending on the Lord to sustain them and to make them aware of how they should operate. So even though the Lord is missing, they don't go to worshiping the golden calf. They don't go to eating and drinking with the drunken, because they are not doing this for somebody else's benefit. They are doing this because it is who they are. They are doing it because the Lord is who they love and who they serve. And so even in this story, that principle is kind of prominent, that it's important that we have this personal relationship above everything else. Thank you for that comparison, Brother Willie. It's a good one. Sister Susan, go ahead.
Matthew 24 goes on, like you read, to talk about Jesus coming, his second coming. But in verse 34, well, it says that this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Jesus said in Luke 24:44 that this is what I was talking to you about. Can you pull that up, Luke 24:44?
Sure. Luke 22.
24. Luke 24:44.
Oh, yeah, after his resurrection.
Yeah. So he said, this is what I was telling you about, that everything would be fulfilled, because it was fulfilled when he died and rose again, when the kingdom came. That's what that was referring to, not to our generation or the generation that will be on the earth when he comes again. But that particular thing was fulfilled. That's what he was telling them. He
Okay.
fulfilled it.
All right. I'm going to agree with you, and yet in a way, I'm not going to apply it the way you applied it in the foolishness, because this statement I would apply to Jesus' statements in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 18. Let me read it, bring it up. In Matthew 5 verses 17 and 18, Jesus says, "Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law, till all be fulfilled." So when he talks about all being fulfilled here, absolutely, I agree with you. This is what he was talking about in Luke 24 when he says, "These are the words which I spake unto you when I was yet with you, that all things must be fulfilled." He is focusing here on the law and the prophets passing. The age of the law and the prophets are past, because now he has become the fulfillment of the law. So all things are fulfilled, and I agree. This is the verse that focuses on it. Now, the reason I make this distinction is because I think in Matthew chapter 24 and in Luke 21, when he talks about all these things being fulfilled, he's focusing on something a little bit different. Because if you look at what he says, in the context of Matthew 24, look at what he says. So likewise ye, when ye shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. The context here is clear. He's talking about the signs that he has mentioned. He has mentioned, then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. He has mentioned,
Read the next verse, though.
I'm going to come down to it. He has mentioned the sun being darkened, the moon not giving her light, the stars falling from heaven. And then he comes down and he says, verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. And then he uses the same, I read the next verse. It's the same kind of oaths that he uses. When he says, heaven and earth shall pass away, but my word shall not pass away. It's the same statement. He makes the same statement in connection with the fulfilling of the law in Matthew chapter 5. But I think even though he uses the same statement, I think the fulfillment here is focusing on the events relating to his coming, relating to his second coming, while Matthew chapter 5 was relating to the events associated with the passing of the law and the establishing of the kingdom. So I agree that it is similar, but I think the context here is a little more specifically focused on the signs that relate to his second coming. Just my thought on that, Sister Susan.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome, my sister. I saw that brother Belly 7. I still don't know who is Belly 7, but his mic is unmuted. Did you want to say something, brother or sister? I'm not sure. All right, probably not. I think brother Joel Mfeke.
Yes, thank you, Brother David.
You're welcome, brother Joel. You can go ahead.
I'm still on verse 34. Then, how do we then explain it? Because I hear it the way you explain it, that he is talking about this generation. He is very specific. He's not saying a generation or that generation, but he said this generation shall not pass until all. And when I hear that until all, I hear that he's talking about until all these things that he just explained, these events have come to pass. So how do we go around that? How do we explain that?
Okay, that's the challenge. The point is, if you start from the beginning of the chapter and you start to look at the destruction of Jerusalem, then it's a very, very long generation, because it talks about the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, and it talks about those who are in Judea flee into the mountains and so on. So the only way I could harmonize it, brother Joel, is the way I've tried to do it. I've tried to point out that these prophecies have a double fulfillment, a dual fulfillment. So while it had a partial fulfillment in the days of the early church, this is why in one of the studies I tried to point out that we're going to see the abomination of desolation again. In another way, it's coming back. In another way, the destruction of it's not the same destruction of the same Jerusalem, but in another way, you're going to also have the overthrow of those who claim to be God's people. The whole scenario is going to be repeated on a macro level, on a global level, if you wish, and then it is a generation that sees this final fulfillment. When we see these things, when we begin to see them happening, then this generation will not pass until everything is finally completely fulfilled. And while we were going through it, I tried to point out that there are several prophecies in the Bible like this. Like, for example, the prophecy about your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your old men shall dream dreams, and so on. Peter said it was fulfilled at Pentecost, but it wasn't. It was only partially fulfilled, because we believe that there is to be a greater, and we are justified in believing it, because it says at that time the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven. If you go to Joel, that's what it says. So we can understand that there are some prophecies, like that prophecy in Joel, like that prophecy about the coming of Elijah again, like this prophecy about the abomination of desolation and the final events, that they have more than one fulfillment. They apply in one age, but the primary and the greatest application is to the end of time. So that's the way I would understand this, Brother Joel, that the events that are mentioned here, all of them are repeated in an end time context on a greater level. And so that's why I would
Brother
understand.
David,
Yes, Brother Raymond, go ahead.
could have Jesus meant, and we are probably, that's what we're trying to figure out. When he said, "This generation shall not pass till all these things are fulfilled," would he be applying to himself as a law being fulfilled for that generation there, and for them to understand that in the future, this was going to cause a reaction, something else was going to happen?
Well, I mean that is something that may happen, but I don't think this prophecy is speaking of that. You know, there are some things that happen, but it may not be mentioned in this prophecy. I think the prophecy itself, I wouldn't find that meaning in the prophecy itself, Brother Ray. All right. Well, if there are no, Sister Iris, go ahead, and then Sister Diane.
Okay, thank you. I would just like to get your explanation as to the point of the parable of Lazarus and the rich man.
Okay. All right. Jesus himself, I don't know if we need to look at it so that probably we should. Let me bring it up, and we look at it, and I'll point to you that there's one verse in particular that just says it very clearly, and it's better if we look at it rather than that I should Luke 16 and verses 19 going down, and it tells you the whole story there, but I won't go through the story. But here's about the point. The rich man says, that he would like Abraham to come and dip Lazarus to come and dip the tip of his finger in water and cool his tongue. Abraham says, no, remember that in your lifetime you had all these good things and Lazarus had evil things. And the story goes down, and then he says, I have 5 brethren, send him that he may testify to them, lest they also come into this place of torment. Abraham said unto him, they have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them. He said, no, Father Abraham, but if somebody went unto them from the dead, they will repent. He said to them, if they hear not Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded, though one rose from the dead. This is the point that Jesus is making. The whole point of this whole story. It's a long story to make a point, but like I pointed out, you will never forget the story, and therefore once you associate the story with the point, you will always remember the point. What he's saying is that the most important thing you can do in life is to believe the word of God. This man wanted somebody to go to his brothers. He wanted a dead man to go back to his brothers. And he felt that, you know, maybe if a dead person comes back, they'll be so frightened out of their wits that they'll believe what he says. Like somebody says, if God send lightning from heaven, no, I will believe. People think like this. All right. They think that because something is done in an extreme way, they will believe. And the point Jesus was making is that if there is not in you the attitude to accept the word of God, not even the lightning and thunder of Mount Sinai is going to make you be persuaded. And I think all of you have seen this in your experience. I've seen people who, I remember a young fellow. He came to our fellowship once. He was a grandson of one of the sisters who worship there, but he went to watch the Passion of Christ. I never watched that show, but I heard people talk about it, right? It was a movie. I think it was Mel Gibson who was the person who was the star, but there was blood and gore. They beat the Jesus who was involved until he was a bloody pulp. They beat him. When you look at, I looked at even the pictures that they put up about it. It was just a mass of raw flesh. And this poor young guy, he came and he said, I saw what they did to Jesus. I'm going to give my life to him. And he was baptized. He became a Christian and was baptized. You know, it lasted about 3 months. It lasted about 3 months. Because blood and gore doesn't make anybody become a Christian. And frightening somebody doesn't make him become a Christian. And impressing the senses doesn't make somebody become a Christian. Jesus is really saying that conviction about the truth is not so much about how dramatically it is told or how sensationally the truth comes to you. It comes from a spirit and a heart that is receptive to God. And that's the point he was making. So the whole of this story, this involved story, was told to make the point that our faith and our response to God is to be based on what he says in his word. That is the basis. Remember, Jesus says, "These are they that testify of me, and yet you will not come to me that you might have life." The words bring us to Christ. And so that's the point. We should respond to the words of God. That's the whole point behind that story that Jesus told.
Okay.
Sister Iris.
Thank you very much. The funeral is going to be Wednesday, and we're going to be going to Akron, which is where he's from. And there might be a lot of people there. Who knows what craziness will happen, but I'm going to have to go because I have to go. You know, there's been things of stories, even here in Cleveland, where people, shoot up funerals and stuff. And he was kind of like into things, I guess, which is maybe why he did what he did. But,
This is your relative who committed suicide, Sister Iris.
Yes. But I've been talking to people, and they've been coming up with some strange conversations, the rapture and all of this stuff. And I just stay silent when I hear this because I know they're not going to listen. But I do. I don't know if people are going to go around talking about, since he, I can't speak on, God's thoughts on him, but I don't want anybody thinking that he's burning in hell at this moment. And I don't know, it's going to be at a church. I don't know what they're going to preach. I don't know what they're going to say.
All right. Well,
But but thank you. I just wanted to make sure I had it. Thank you. You made it better, me understand it better. Thank you.
okay, Sister Iris, and you know that our prayers are with you and with the family. Brother David asked a question. Let me just respond quickly. He says, "I have a question. Is it the close of probation that will be a surprise, or his actual second coming?" Thanks for the question, Brother David. And I agree with you. There is Sister Di, I'm coming to you. Sorry for bypassing you. I agree that when we understand the sequence of events relating to the coming of Jesus, clearly the surprise will be what we refer to as the close of probation. And we might compare it to the time when the door of the ark was closed. I'm pretty sure that, well, even then, the people of the world never knew how soon the flood would come. But I guess they got pretty alarmed when they saw the door closed. But the thing is, up until that moment, and even when Noah started going in the ark, Noah and his family obviously knew that we are in the last moment. And when the door closed, then it was the decisive moment when that separation took place. And so there's something similar coming to which you allude when you talk about the close of probation. In the parable of the virgins, it is when the bridegroom goes in and the door is shut. In the parable of the tears, it is when the angels come and they separate the wheat from the tares. And usually in the parables of Jesus, he talks about that time and he says, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. They shall be cast into outer darkness. So I agree with you that there is a period just before the coming of Jesus when the door is closed, and then people may begin to wake up to what is happening. But I still believe that the actual coming of Jesus will still catch the wicked by surprise. But God's people by then will know that, okay, it's just a matter of a few moments. So I agree, Brother David. Sister Diane, go ahead.
I have a question of, couldn't there be a type of deception to thinking someone is right when they're not. I mean, you've got the legalism and they work, but then if you've got someone who, quote unquote, is in and know the truth, and by that assent to truth and think that that makes them righteous, and yet behavior shows otherwise, wouldn't there be a deception of sorts that people can be deceived in thinking they're righteous because of what group they're in or what they've assented to as truth, just as easily as those that are legalistic?
There are at least 3 places in the Bible that absolutely teach this in the clearest way. One of them is a message to the Laodicean church where Jesus says that because you say I'm rich and increased with goods and I have need of nothing, I'll spew you out of my mouth. Then there's a parable of the wise and the foolish virgin. The foolish virgin are said to have lamps, and the biblical interpretation is, thy word is a lamp unto my feet. The lamp represents the word of God. So they do have Bible truth in my understanding of this parable. They have the lamp, but they don't have any oil, because the word of God without the Holy Spirit is nothing. And there are many people who think that because they can explain a certain prophecy or they can pontificate on a certain doctrine, that is salvation. But absolutely not. The framework of truth will not save anybody. It's true that it's the bread that has been anointed with a frankincense, if I may put it that way, if I may use the biblical illustration. And then there's a story of the guests that came to the wedding feast. A man came in, the guests were invited to the feast, and a man came in, and everybody was there, but this man didn't have on a wedding garment. I'm sure this man had a good grasp of what was true as far as the theory of it goes, but he never knew the Lord. He didn't have on the wedding garment. So I agree with you, Sister Diane. There are many places that this is clearly taught. All right, so I think this just about brings us to the end of our time for this evening. Brother Matt, go ahead.
There's always one, right? Um, my question is really based on last Sabbath's study, and maybe this morning a little bit, but I'm a little confused when I think about God's character in context of that we're all saved individually, but we were all lost. We were all assumed Adam's condition corporately. What benefit was it to make to design the race like that? I don't see the greater good in it, and I know there's always a reason that God, for the things that God does, and I'm not confused about His love for us at all. It's just I'm trying to sync the two,
Yeah. All right. I think, first of all, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit, Brother Matt. We were lost corporately, and we are not saved individually. We are saved corporately. I think that's the thing that I would disagree with you on. What do I mean when I say we are saved corporately? We are lost corporately because we have inherited the life of our forefather Adam. That's what constitutes our lost state, the life of Adam in us. We are an extension of Adam's life. It's not just that God arbitrarily says, okay, I'm going to put you all in the same basket. There's a practical reason why we're lost in Adam. It's because we have inherited Adam's life. So if you look at the other side of the picture, what is it that makes us saved? It's the inheriting of Jesus' life. We are not saved individually. You are not saved as Matt. You are saved as a part of Jesus Christ, just like you are lost as a part of Adam. So salvation is a corporate thing. All of us are saved in one place, in one space, and at the same moment in time. We were crucified in Christ. We were born again in Christ. It is Jesus who will live, not you or me. So we are corporately saved. The only difference is that when you are born the first time, you are automatically placed in Adam because you don't have any choice about being born. But the second time, you already have a personality and you already have the ability to choose. So God cannot just take everybody and put them in the second Adam. When it comes to the second Adam, you have to be born again, and now you have a choice. And the choice is to believe in Jesus. Those who believe can inherit the life that already exists, the saved life. You inherit the saved life. You don't go through the process of salvation again when you accept Christ. You enter into salvation that has already been accomplished. So we belong to the new race that has been born again. We belonged to the old race that was simply born, but through faith now, the old life came into existence, or you entered into the old life by a process of sexual reproduction. But you enter into the new life by a process of faith, which you might call spiritual reproduction, right? So it's the same process, but only that we have to think for a while before we can see the parallels and recognize it's the same thing on both sides. But because one is spiritual and because one is happening to grown-up people already existing, it's not as straightforward to see the parallel. But when you stop and think about it, it also highlights certain things, because until you see this, the simplicity of salvation is not so clear. But when you see this, you realize, okay, I'm not saved as David. My problem is not how to be saved. My problem is how to become a part of the salvation that already exists. It simplifies it. You can understand better what it means to believe in Jesus. It's simply accepting what is already existing.
If I understand correctly, you're saying that we're all saved corporately when Jesus died and was resurrected, but
Absolutely.
right, corporately, but then we individually make that choice to be a part of it.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome, my brother. I'm going
That's
to pray to close.
a good point, Brother David. Thank you so much for that answer. Because I've heard this corporate thing, but I never heard, Willen and Short and them talked about it, but I never got it clear because it was too much. That was the simplicity of it. It makes sense to me.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord.
Thank you.
Yes. Let's pray to officially close our meeting.